Good morning students, this is Latif sir. In this video today I'll discuss about different types of separation techniques. So first type of separation technique is hand picking. Hand picking. The method of separation of a mixture by picking out the components with one's hand is called hand picking. Okay. So this is the definition of hand picking. The method of separation of mixture by picking out the components with one hands is called hand picking. So in hand picking method you can separate the component of a mixture using your own hand, and the differentiating property in this method is the visible difference in size, shape, color of the component of the mixture. This is the principle of this method. Okay, for example, now see use of this method. Small stone present in pulses or rice can be separated by picking them out with one's hand. Okay, so details, one thing I want to mention, that in every type of separation technique you have to remember the principle, basic principle of separation, okay, and use of this method and definition of the method. These 3 points you have to remember. Details process of the method is not required. Okay, so now see second method of separation is sieving. Okay, sieving, this method, what is sieving? The method of separating a mixture by using a sieve is called sieving. The method of separating a mixture by using a sieve is called sieving. And what is the differentiating property in this method? The differentiating property in sieving is the size of the component of the mixture. Is the size of the component of the mixture. Now see use of this method. Using this method, you can separate the larger particles, larger stone present in sand. Okay, when a mixture is placed on a sieve and the sieve is shaken, the smaller component falls down through the holes of sieve, whereas the larger component remain on the sieve. Sand is sieved at construction site and remove the small stone or gravel from it. Okay, so using sieving you can separate sand. You can separate sand from small stone. Now see next method is winnowing. Winnowing, that is using the help of wind. The method of separating a mixture using wind or by blowing air is called winnowing. The method of separating a mixture using wind or blowing air is called winnowing. And the method uses mass as the differentiating property. Mass as the differentiating property under the action of gravity. Lighter component can separate it from heavier component using this method. Okay, here a application of this method is given. The heavier component falls almost straight downward and the lighter component is blown away by wind to form a separate heap of at a distance. Chaff, the lighter component, is separated from grain is heavier component by this method. This is the application of this method, winnowing. Chaff, the lighter component, is separated from grain which is heavier component using winnowing. Next method is magnetic separation. Magnetic separation using a magnet. Okay, so the method of separating magnetic component of a mixture from non-magnetic component using a magnet is called magnetic separation. And using this method you can separate magnetic components such as iron scrap or other metals that get attracted by magnet can be easily separated from a heap of waste. Okay, so using this method you can separate a mixture of iron and sand. Okay, so this is the application of this method. Next method is sublimation. Sublimation, you know what is sublimation, you have already studied in lower class. Sublimation means the process of conversion of a solid directly into gas. Solid to gaseous interconversion uh, is known as sublimation. Okay, and this method used for the separation of solid which undergo sublimation. Solid, using the method sublimation you can separate those solid which can sublime, okay, which undergo sublimation. For example, iodine is separated using this method. Using sublimation method, iodine is separated from sand through sublimation. Okay, on heating, iodine changes into iodine vapor because it can sublime, and it is then collected and cooled. Similarly, naphthalene, ammonium chloride, camphor, these are sublime solid, and these are also sublime solid which can be separated from a mixture of by sublimation. Okay. Next method is froth flotation. This method is actually used in metallurgy during estimation or extraction of metal. Okay, froth flotation method. This method is based on the principle of preferential. See the principle of this method. Principle is preferential weighting of component of a mixture. Froth flotation. This method is based on the principle of preferential weighting of components of a mixture, and the differentiating property used in this method is weighting. And this method is applicable for concentration of sulfide ore. For concentration of sulfide ore, this descriptive description of this method is not required. Okay, just remember definition of this term, general principle of separation of this method you have to remember. Okay, and what is the differentiating property in this method you have to remember, and where it is used, that is application of this method. So froth flotation, this method is used for concentration of sulfide ore. Sulfide ore like zinc sulfide or lead sulfide, zinc sulfide. Okay, this metal sulfide can be concentrated using the method froth flotation. And in this method, pine oil, sodium ethyl xanthate or potassium ethyl xanthate, water, these are mixture are used. These water, pine oil, ethyl xanthate or potassium ethyl xanthate and water are mixed with crushed and finely powdered sulfide ore. And you have to remember that sulfide ore like lead sulfide, zinc sulfide, these metal sulfide ore which are more soluble in pine oil. Okay, so the detailed description of this method is not required, I have told. Now see dissolution, next method. What is dissolution? The method of crushing a solute particle to pass into solution. The method of causing a solute particle to pass into a solution is called dissolution or dissolving. It is also called dissolving or dissolution. What is dissolution? The method of causing a solute particle to pass into a solution is called dissolution or dissolving. And this method used when one component is soluble in a particular solvent and the other component is insoluble in that solvent. Okay, so for example, using this method you can separate sand and salt, because salt is soluble in water, and sand is insoluble in water. So using dissolution, this method, you can separate a mixture of sand and salt. Okay, one more example is given application. Just read one. Now see, next method is sedimentation and decantation. Sedimentation and decantation. What is sedimentation? Sedimentation, and here it is decantation. So sedimentation, the method of separating insoluble solid. Remember this, I have highlighted the method of separating insoluble solid components suspended in a liquid. Suspended in a liquid by allowing them to settle under the force of gravity is called sedimentation. The method of separating insoluble solid components suspended in a liquid by allowing them to settle under the force of gravity is called sedimentation. And the sedimentation process can be hastened by adding potash alum. By adding, this is the one question, why potash alum is used in the process of sedimentation. Okay, the sedimentation process can be hastened by adding potash alum to the mixture, and this process is known as loading. Okay, you have to remember the definition of loading. Loading is related to the process of sedimentation. Okay, in sedimentation you have to if you use potash alum, it will hasten the process of sedimentation, and this process is known as loading. And the component that settle down, is known as sediment. The substance or component that settle down is called sediment, and the liquid above the sediment is called supernatant. The liquid above the sediment is called the supernatant. Okay, and now see what is decantation. The process of pouring out this supernatant without disturbing the sediment is called decantation. Here it is showing, you can see from the picture. Okay, this is the decantation method, and this is sedimentation. What is decantation? The process of pouring out the supernatant without disturbing the sediment is called decantation. Using this method, you can separate sand from water. Okay, sandy water can be separated into sand and clear water by sedimentation and decantation. Next method is filtration. Filtration, very simple method. The method of separating insoluble, this is here it is also insoluble solid, separation of insoluble solid. The method of separating insoluble solid components suspended in a liquid using a filter is called filtration. The method of separating insoluble solid components suspended in a liquid using a filter is called filtration. Okay, and the filter can be filter paper, or the filter can be a sieve or a strainer. And in this method, a mixture of insoluble solid and liquid is poured through a filter paper, and the liquid that passes through the filter, the liquid that passes through the filter is called filtrate, and the insoluble component that remain on the filter is called residue. Okay, the liquid that passes through the filter is called filtrate, and the liquid and the insoluble solid component that remain on the filter paper is called residue. Okay, so using this method, you can separate mud from muddy water. This is one application. You can separate chalk from water. You can separate mud from muddy water by filtration. And method of filtration is showing in this figure. You can see using a filter paper. Okay, so this is filtration. Next method is evaporation. Next method is evaporation. What is evaporation? The process of changing a substance from liquid state to its gaseous state, liquid to gaseous state at room temperature, at a temperature below its boiling point is called evaporation. The process of changing a liquid into gas below its boiling point is known as evaporation, and heating increases the rate of evaporation. Okay, and evaporation can be used, this method can be used to obtain a solid component from a homogeneous mixture or homogeneous solution of solid and liquid. And in evaporation method, the solid and liquids in this method, the liquid is evaporated completely to dryness, leaving behind the solid. Now see example of this method. Using this method, you can separate sodium chloride salt from salt water or from seawater. You can separate sugar from sugar solution using evaporation. You have to evaporate the liquid solvent. Okay. Next method is separating funnel. Using separating funnel, and separating funnel look like this. Okay, this is separating funnel. Using this method, a mixture of immiscible liquids, very important term here written, a mixture of immiscible liquids, that is emulsion, can be separated using a separating funnel. A mixture of immiscible liquids like oil and water, can be separated by using separating funnel. Okay, and the separation of emulsion is based on the principle that the lighter liquid, what is the principle here? The lighter liquid will float above the heavier liquid. Detailed description of this method not required. Okay, so now see the example is given. Using this method you can separate oil from water. Okay, from oil from water using separating funnel. Now see, next method is distillation. What is distillation? The method of separating a liquid from a soluble component. Distillation, this is the distillation method. The method of separation of liquid from a soluble component by first converting it into its vapor and then condensing the vapor is called distillation. The method of separation of a liquid from a soluble component by first converting the liquid into its vapor and then condensing the vapor into its liquid state is known as distillation. And this process or method is used for the separating of miscible liquid. So miscible liquid can be separated using this method, distillation, and immiscible liquids can be separated using separating funnel. Okay, so this method is used for the separation of miscible liquid having different boiling point. Okay, so miscible liquid having different boiling point can be separated by using distillation method. Okay, for example, you can separate different alcohols using this method, or you can separate different petrol, diesel, kerosene from their mixture. And distillation is this method is carried out in a special round bottom flask which is called distillation flask. Here it is given distillation flask, this picture. And distillation flask is used as it is more resistant to the fracturing the glass in vacuum and provides uniform heating. This is the use of why distillation flask is used in the process of distillation. Here the answer is given. Distillation flux is used as it is more resistant to the fracturing of glass in vacuum and provide uniform heating. And in this method, a condenser for cooling, a condenser is fitted to the distillation flux. Upon cooling, the condenser, the vapor vapor of more volatile liquid component condense into pure liquid, and the pure liquid then collected in the receiver. Okay, so distilled water used in laboratory injection solution, medicines and batteries are obtained using this method. And using distillation method, you can also separate alcohol from water, because alcohol has lower boiling point than water. Now see, next method is fractional distillation. The previous one was only for distillation. It is fractional distillation. What is fractional distillation? Fractional distillation is a separation method of miscible liquids mixture. Okay, fractional distillation fractional distillation is a separation method of miscible liquid mixture having closer boiling point that cannot be separated by simple distillation method. Like distillation, in this method also work on the principle that a liquid having lower boiling point would vaporize earlier than the liquid having higher boiling point. This is the principle of this method in same principle used in distillation and in fractional distillation. Okay, and using this method you can separate different oils present in crude oil. Okay, this method used in refineries to separate the crude oil into various useful substances such as petrol, diesel, kerosene and other fuels. And fractional distillation, this is a important use of fractional distillation. Fractional distillation of coal tar is used to obtain large number of organic compounds. Okay, so fractional distillation method, this method is used in refineries to separate crude oil into various useful substances such as petrol, diesel, kerosene and other fuels. And fractional distillation of coal tar is used to obtain large number of organic substances or organic compounds. And next separation method is crystallization. Separation by crystallization. So what is crystallization? It is a technique which is used to separate a dissolved solid from its solution. Crystallization is a technique which is used to separate a dissolved solid from a solution. Okay, and using this method rock candy, that is candy sugar or misri, is crystallization is an example of crystallized sugar lumps obtained from crystallization. Okay, this is the application of crystallization. Next method is centrifugation. Okay, and this method of separation what is centrifugation? The method of separating finely suspended solid component in a liquid by spinning the mixture in a closed container at a very high speed is called centrifugation. The method of separating finely suspended solid component in a liquid. The method of separating finely suspended solid component in a liquid by spinning the mixture in a closed container at very high speed is called centrifugation. Okay, and it is carried out in a machine which is called centrifuge machine. Okay, and the underlying principle, what is the principle of this method? The principle is that the heavier particle experience larger centrifugal force than the lighter particle. This is the principle, working principle of this method. The heavier particles experience larger centrifugal force than the lighter particle. You have to remember the principle also. Okay. And using this centrifugation method, the liquid is separated. Using this method, butter can be separated from milk. Okay, this method also used in laboratory to separate blood and other and its all components. Okay, next is chromatography. It is modern technique of separation. Okay, so chromatography is a technique of separating a mixture of chemicals in gas or in liquid form. In chromatography, it has a stationary phase and a mobile phase, a solid stationary phase and a liquid mobile phase generally. Okay, so it has a stationary phase and a mobile phase through which the mixture is separated, and it is based on selective adsorption. Very important point. So, working principle of chromatography is it is based on selective adsorption. Adsorption means absorption on the surface. So you have to remember the definition of adsorption. What is adsorption? It is adsorption means absorption at the surface is known as adsorption. Okay. For example, writing with chalk on the blackboard is a surface adsorption, as the chalk remains on the surface of the blackboard. Here, what is the meaning of chromatography? It is given literally uh, means chromatography literally means color writing, because in earlier times it was used to separate a mixture that that had colored component. And one modern method of chromatography is paper chromatography. Paper chromatography, it is one type of chromatography, is the most common chromatography procedure. In this method, we take a special paper, usually cellulose filter paper, that act as a stationary phase, and a suitable solvent which is act as mobile phase. Okay, and you have to remember the application of paper chromatography. Very important use of paper chromatography. Paper chromatography, it is used for identifying constituent in a mixture. Paper chromatography is used for separating amino acid, and paper chromatography is used for determining organic components and biochemicals in urine, and paper chromatography is used for determination of hormones and drug in pharmaceutical sector. So these are very important application of paper chromatography. Okay, and the last topic is combination method of separation. How to separate a mixture of different substance using combination method. Okay, so suppose you have a mixture of iron filling, sand, wood savings and ammonium chloride. So you have to use different method to separate this component of the mixture. First, iron fillings are separated by magnetic separation using a magnet. Okay, and the mixture of sand, wood saving and ammonium chloride is left behind. In second step, wood saving are separated by winnowing, and the mixture of sand, ammonium chloride left behind. In third step, ammonium chloride is separated from sand by sublimation, because ammonium chloride can sublime. Okay, and one more example is given: separation of zinc dust, iron dust and sulfur powder. Okay, by magnetic separation, iron dust is removed. Iron dust is separated from zinc dust and sulfur powder. And second step, remaining mixture, that is zinc dust and sulfur powder, the remaining mixture is dissolved in carbon disulfide. Sulfur gets dissolved and in third step filter the mixture. Zinc is obtained as residue on the filter paper and the sulfur in the filtrate, and evaporate. In fourth step evaporate the solvent carbon disulfide, evaporate the solvent carbon disulfide to get sulfur. So using a combination method you can separate the different component of a mixture. Okay, so and this chapter is completed. Thank you students.